The emergency meeting bells rang through the crystal halls of the Galactic Council building, sending vibrations that could be felt 3 levels down. Ambassador Cryan adjusted his ceremonial robes as he walked toward the main chamber, knowing that today would change everything. The vote had already been counted twice and the result remained the same. Earth would be classified as Class X Forbidden Zone, the highest level of quarantine in galactic law. Inside the chamber, representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned sections, their various breathing apparatus and translation devices creating a constant low hum. Cryan had served as the Alteran Federation's voice for over 2 decades, but he had never felt the weight of his words like he did today. The holographic display behind him showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in space. Earth, home to 7 billion humans who had no idea their fate was being decided by beings they didn't even know existed. Fellow council members, Cryan began, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic system. We have gathered to address the growing concern about the species known as humans. Our observation teams have submitted their final reports and the conclusion is clear. These beings represent a threat unlike any we have encountered in our recorded history. The Valdoran representative shifted uncomfortably in her liquid-filled chamber. She had read the classified reports, documents that painted humans as violent, unpredictable creatures who solved conflicts through warfare and competition. Yet something about the reports felt incomplete, as if they were only telling half the story. The numbers didn't add up. How could a species so dangerous create such beautiful art, such moving music, such profound literature? Cryan continued his presentation, displaying holographic images of human cities, their towering buildings and sprawling networks of transportation. They consume resources at an alarming rate. They wage wars over trivial differences, and they show no signs of developing the collective consciousness that marks true civilization. Our xenopsychologists warn that extended contact with humans could destabilize our own societies, introducing chaos where we have built order. In the back rows, the younger representatives whispered among themselves. Many had grown up hearing stories about the mysterious blue planet, tales passed down from deep space explorers who claimed to have witnessed humans performing impossible acts of courage and creativity. But those stories were dismissed as folklore, myths created by space-weary travelers who spent too much time alone between the stars. Now they were being told that contact with these same beings could somehow corrupt their minds. The Meridian delegate raised one of his 4 arms, requesting permission to speak. Ambassador Cryan, with respect, your reports focus heavily on human conflicts and resource consumption. Have your team studied their cultural achievements, their scientific innovations developed without outside assistance, their capacity for individual sacrifice for collective benefit? Cryan's expression darkened slightly. The question struck at the heart of the classified material, information that even most council members weren't authorized to access. Delegate Oren, the cultural aspects of human society are precisely what make them so dangerous. They possess an ability to think in contradictory patterns that defies logical analysis. This cognitive instability could spread through contact, disrupting the harmonious societies we have spent millennia perfecting. What Cryan didn't mention were the secret experiments conducted on volunteers from various species. Subjects exposed to human entertainment, literature, and art showed dramatic changes in brain chemistry within weeks. They began questioning authority structures that had remained stable for centuries, expressing desires for individual achievement that conflicted with species-wide goals, and worst of all, they started creating original works that their own cultures couldn't classify or understand. The vote proceeded according to protocol, with each species casting their decision through secure channels. 43 voted in favor of the prohibition, 3 voted against, and 1 abstained. Earth would be surrounded by an invisible barrier of law and military enforcement, cutting off all contact between humanity and the galactic community. Any ship approaching the Sol system would be intercepted and destroyed without warning. Any attempt to communicate with Earth would result in immediate expulsion from Council protection. As the session ended and representatives began filing out through various exits suited to their physiology, Few noticed the small group gathered in the observation gallery. These weren't official delegates but private citizens, scientists, artists, and philosophers who had requested permission to witness this historic decision. Among them was Dr. Vera Chen, a human-born xenobiologist who had been living in council space since childhood, one of only a handful of humans who had escaped Earth before the prohibition was enacted. Chen watched the proceedings with growing unease. She had spent her career studying interspecies psychology, and something about the official narrative didn't match her research. If humans were truly as chaotic and dangerous as the reports claimed, why were black market dealers throughout Council space paying enormous sums for human cultural artifacts? Why were there underground networks trading human music, literature, and even simple household items like they were precious relics? On the far side of the galaxy, Captain David Roth received the news through encrypted channels aboard his modified transport ship. As one of the few humans living in exile among the stars, he had become something of a legend, a bridge between two worlds that were now forbidden from meeting. The prohibition meant he could never return home. But more troubling were the secret messages he had been receiving from various alien species, requests that made no sense given the official position on humanity. A Zephyrian merchant had offered him a fortune for recordings of human children singing lullabies. A crystalline researcher wanted samples of human tears, not for scientific study, but because she claimed they contained emotional resonance her species had lost millennia ago. Most bizarre of all, a collective intelligence from the hive worlds had requested permission to experience human dreams, offering to trade their most advanced technology for the privilege. Roth stared out at the stars from his ship's observation deck, trying to understand the contradiction. If the Council truly believed humans were dangerous, why were individual Council citizens so desperately curious about them? He had lived among dozens of alien species, learned their languages, adopted their customs, and never once had anyone seemed afraid of him. If anything, they seemed fascinated, drawn to something about humanity that even they couldn't explain. The official prohibition broadcast reached every corner of Council space within hours, translated into over 300 languages and communication methods. Earth was now officially classified as off-limits, its location marked on all navigation systems with warnings of severe penalties for approach. Military patrols would be established at the edge of the Sol system, and any vessel attempting to breach the quarantine would face immediate destruction. But in the shadows between official channels, a different conversation was beginning. The prohibition had done more than isolate Earth. It had created the galaxy's most forbidden fruit, a mystery that grew more tempting with every passing day. Across countless worlds, beings who had never heard of humans before today found themselves wondering about the species so dangerous that contact with them was literally illegal. Chen made her decision as she left the Council building. As a trained xenobiologist with legal residency in Council space, she was uniquely positioned to investigate the growing underground interest in human culture. If the official reports were accurate, she should be able to easily prove why the prohibition was necessary. But if her suspicions were correct, she might uncover a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of galactic government. The prohibition was now galactic law, backed by the combined military might of 47 species. Earth was alone, isolated, behind a wall of enforcement that made contact impossible. But isolation, as the Council would soon discover, only made the forbidden more desirable. The seeds of curiosity had been planted, and like all living things, they would find a way to grow even in the darkest soil. Human history was about to enter a new chapter, one where humanity's greatest strength, their ability to inspire others, would work even in their absence. The galaxy had tried to contain the human spirit, but they had only succeeded in making it legendary. And legends, as every storytelling species knew, had a way of becoming more powerful than the truth they were meant to replace. Dr. Vera Chen pressed her identification card against the security scanner at Research Station Omega-7, a neutral facility orbiting between 3 different stellar systems, where scientists from various species could work without political interference. 6 months had passed since the Earth prohibition, and Chen had used her position to investigate the growing black market trade in human artifacts that seemed to operate despite the galactic ban. The lab corridors buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of worlds conducted experiments that their home governments might not approve of. Chen had chosen this assignment specifically because Omega-7's charter guaranteed research freedom, even for studies that challenged official council policies. Her nominal project involved analyzing communication patterns between different species, but her real work happened after hours when the main shifts ended. Tonight she had arranged to meet with someone who claimed to have access to the underground human artifact network. The contact had reached out through encrypted channels, offering to trade information about the black market in exchange for Chen's expertise in human psychology. Chen suspected this might be a council trap, but her curiosity outweighed her caution. The contradictions surrounding humanity had become an obsession. In the station's recreational area, she spotted her contact immediately. Nix was a Vorthon, a species known for their honesty and their complete inability to lie due to biological limitations in their brain structure. He sat alone at a corner table, his 6 arms nervously adjusting various small devices that Chen recognized as signal jammers and privacy shields. When she approached, his large compound eyes reflected both excitement and fear. "Dr. Chen," Nix whispered, though his species' vocal cords made whispering sound more like grinding metal. "What I'm about to show you could result in my exile from Vorthan space, but I cannot remain silent about what I have discovered. The trade in human artifacts has grown beyond anything the Council suspects, and the effects on purchasers are far more significant than mere curiosity." He activated a holographic display that showed shipping routes crisscrossing the galaxy, with highlighted stops at dozens of worlds. This represents just one network. There are at least 12 others operating independently. They move human music recordings, literature, artworks, even simple objects like eating utensils and clothing items. The prices have increased by over 300% in the past 6 months alone. Chen studied the data with growing amazement. The scale of the operation was staggering, involving thousands of individuals across dozens of species. But where are these artifacts coming from if Earth is under prohibition? No ships have been allowed near the Sol system since the ban was implemented. Nix's expression grew troubled, a pattern of color changes rippling across his carapace. That is where the story becomes disturbing. Most items are being stolen from museums, private collections, and research facilities that had human artifacts from before the prohibition. But some appear to be new, recordings, writings, and artworks created recently. Someone has ongoing contact with Earth despite the military blockade. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. Either the prohibition was not as complete as the Council claimed, or there were humans living outside their home system who were actively supplying the black market. She thought of Captain Roth and the handful of other human exiles scattered across Council space. Were they part of this network, or were there more humans out there than anyone realized? "Show me the effects on purchasers," Chen requested, trying to maintain scientific objectivity despite her emotional investment in the subject. Nix hesitated, then activated another display showing brain scans from various species. These are medical records from beings who have been exposed to human cultural materials. Notice the changes in neural pathway formation, particularly in regions associated with creativity and individual decision-making. The scans were remarkable. Species that had shown stable, predictable brain patterns for millennia were developing new neural networks within weeks of exposure to human culture. Crystalline beings who typically functioned as collective consciousness began showing individual thought patterns. Hive mind species started expressing personal preferences that conflicted with group decisions. Even machine-based intelligences reported experiencing something they could only describe as feelings. The Council's own research teams documented similar effects, Nix continued, but their conclusion was that these changes represented corruption rather than evolution. They classified human influence as a form of cognitive virus that threatened social stability across the galaxy. What they did not anticipate was how desperately beings would seek out this infection once they experienced its effects. Chen reviewed case studies that read like addiction reports. Alteran diplomats who had been exposed to human music began composing original pieces that their own people found incomprehensible but emotionally moving. Zephyrian merchants started making business decisions based on intuition rather than pure profit calculations. Even the notoriously logical Nexari began creating art that served no practical purpose beyond aesthetic pleasure. The demand is so high that entire criminal organizations have formed around human artifact smuggling, Nix explained. They operate with more secrecy than weapons dealers or illegal technology traders. A single recording of human children singing can sell for enough credits to purchase a small starship. A book of human poetry recently traded for the equivalent of a planetary defense system. The economic impact was staggering, but Chen was more interested in the psychological implications. Have you interviewed any long-term users? What happens to beings who have extended exposure to human culture? Nix activated a final display showing personal testimonies from dozens of individuals. They report fundamental changes in how they perceive reality. Many describe it as awakening from a long sleep, or seeing colors they didn't know existed. They become more creative, more emotionally expressive, more willing to challenge authority. Some describe it as remembering parts of themselves they had forgotten existed. Chen read through the testimonies with growing excitement. These weren't the ravings of corrupted minds, but eloquent descriptions of psychological growth and expansion. Beings were discovering aspects of consciousness that their species had either never developed or had deliberately suppressed in favor of social harmony. Human culture wasn't destroying alien minds, it was completing them. There is something else, Nick said quietly. Several networks are pooling resources to fund unauthorized expeditions to Earth itself. They believe that direct contact with living humans would produce effects far beyond what artifacts can achieve. The risks are enormous. Discovery would mean execution for everyone involved. But the potential rewards have driven some beings to desperation. Chen felt her pulse quicken. The idea of secret expeditions to Earth was both thrilling and terrifying. If discovered, such missions could trigger a galactic war between the Council and any species involved. But if successful, they might provide answers to questions that had haunted her since childhood. What made humanity so special that entire civilizations feared their influence? I want to meet with these expedition planners, Chen said, making a decision that would change her life forever. My research could be valuable to their mission, and I need to understand what drives beings to risk everything for contact with my species. Nix's color patterns shifted to deep purple, indicating severe anxiety. Dr. Chen, you must understand the dangers involved. The Council has placed bounties on anyone found trafficking human artifacts. Entire families have been exiled, careers destroyed, lives ruined. And the expedition planners are not idealistic scientists. They are desperate beings who will do anything to satisfy their craving for human contact. Despite the warnings, Chen felt more alive than she had in years. For the first time since the prohibition, she had a purpose beyond merely surviving in exile. The underground network represented hope, proof that the barriers between humans and aliens were artificial constructs that could be overcome by genuine curiosity and mutual benefit. Arrange a meeting, she told Nix firmly. If beings across the galaxy are willing to risk everything to understand humanity, then humanity owes it to them to be understood. Besides, I suspect the Council's prohibition has created exactly the opposite effect they intended. Instead of containing human influence, they've made it more powerful than ever. As Chen left the meeting, she realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed since the prohibition. What began as an attempt to isolate humanity had become a catalyst for revolutionary thinking across dozens of species. The Council had tried to build a wall around Earth, but walls worked both ways. They didn't just keep humans in, they kept the rest of the galaxy out, making contact with humanity the ultimate forbidden experience. The underground network was growing stronger every day, fueled by beings who had tasted something they couldn't find anywhere else in the galaxy. Human creativity, human emotion, human unpredictability, qualities that the Council saw as weaknesses were proving to be exactly what other species needed to break free from the limitations of their own evolution. Chen smiled as she walked back to her quarters. Tomorrow she would begin planning her own contribution to the network, using her unique position as both human and xenobiologist to bridge the gap between worlds. The prohibition had been designed to end human influence on galactic civilization. Instead, it had created the conditions for humanity's greatest impact on alien society, an impact that would happen not through force or conquest, but through the simple power of beings wanting to understand each other. Commander Lars Eriksson checked the modified stealth systems aboard his merchant vessel for the third time that morning, knowing that a single detection by Council patrols would mean death for him and his entire crew. The ship had been renamed Wanderer to hide its original registration, and its cargo holds had been converted into specialized observation equipment that could monitor Earth from the edge of the solar system without triggering human detection systems. His crew represented 12 different species, each bringing unique expertise to what everyone understood was likely a one-way mission. They had spent 2 years planning this expedition, pooling resources from dozens of underground networks and black market contacts who shared their desperate curiosity about the forbidden world. The financial cost had bankrupted 3 minor trading companies, but the potential rewards, direct observation of living humans in their natural environment, made the risk worthwhile. The crystalline navigator, Vera, had calculated a route that would avoid all known patrol patterns while approaching Earth through the asteroid belt. Her species typically functioned as collective consciousness, but months of exposure to human music had awakened individual thoughts that sometimes conflicted with her people's shared mind. She found the experience both terrifying and exhilarating, like discovering she had been living in a cage she didn't know existed. Approaching the outer marker, announced Tobias, the ship's Nexari communications specialist. His kind were known for their logical approach to problem-solving, but recent exposure to human poetry had introduced emotional considerations into his calculations that his colleagues back home would find incomprehensible. Council patrol signatures are following predicted patterns. We should have a clear window for the next 14 hours. Lars felt his heart beating faster as the Wanderer slipped past Jupiter's gravitational field. Every member of his crew had volunteered knowing the risks, driven by changes in their psychology that they couldn't fully explain. The human artifacts they had studied over the past year had affected each of them differently, but all reported similar sensations, a sense of awakening, of discovering capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Dr. Kira Ocean, their xenobiologist, monitored the passive scanning equipment that would allow them to observe Earth without revealing their presence. She belonged to a species that had achieved perfect social harmony through the elimination of individual desire. But exposure to human art had reintroduced concepts of personal achievement and creative expression that her people had abandoned centuries ago. The internal conflict was painful, but she found herself unwilling to return to the empty peace of her former existence. Initial scans complete, Kira reported, her voice filled with wonder. The planet is even more remarkable than our models predicted. The diversity of ecosystems, the complexity of urban organization, the sheer energy output from billions of individual consciousness. It's unlike anything in our databases. Through the ship's enhanced viewing systems, the crew watched Earth rotate slowly below them, its blue oceans and swirling white clouds creating patterns of beauty that no artist among their species had ever imagined. But more fascinating than the planet's physical appearance were the signs of human activity. Cities that pulsed with light and movement, transportation networks that operated without central coordination, and most remarkably, individual humans, making decisions that affected the behavior of their entire civilization. "Look at this," whispered Han, the Vorthon psychologist who had joined the expedition to study human social dynamics. His species had eliminated conflict through rigid social hierarchies, but human entertainment had introduced him to concepts of rebellion, romance, and personal growth that made his orderly world seem suddenly restrictive. They're having what appears to be a celebration in multiple cities simultaneously, but there's no central coordination. They're choosing to participate individually. The crew spent hours watching human festivals, sporting events, and ordinary daily activities with The fascination of scientists discovering a new form of life. What amazed them wasn't human technology, which was primitive by galactic standards, but human behavior patterns that defied everything they understood about intelligent species. Humans regularly sacrificed personal benefit for abstract principles, created art that served no practical purpose, and formed emotional bonds that transcended genetic or tribal connections. Their decision-making processes are completely irrational by our standards, observed Zen, their Altaran philosopher, yet they consistently achieve results that pure logic would suggest are impossible. They cooperate without coercion, create without requirement, and adapt without central planning. It's as if they've discovered a method of consciousness that bypasses the limitations that restrict our own species. As days turned into weeks, the crew documented thousands of hours of human activity, building the most comprehensive database of human behavior ever assembled by non-humans. But more significant than their scientific observations were the personal changes each crew member experienced. Extended exposure to human society began affecting their own thought patterns in ways that made their previous existence seem incomplete. Dr. Maya Rodriguez, monitoring deep space communications from her research facility in Colorado, began noticing anomalous signals during her routine sweeps of the electromagnetic spectrum. As Earth's leading expert on potential alien contact, she had spent years searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence, never suspecting that such intelligence might already be watching humanity. The signals were too regular to be natural phenomena, too complex to be equipment malfunction. "These aren't random emissions," she reported to her colleague Dr. James Park during their weekly analysis meeting. "The patterns suggest deliberate observation. Someone is using advanced scanning technology to monitor our planet from somewhere in the outer system. The signals are heavily masked, but I can detect at least 3 different transmission sources." Park reviewed the data with growing excitement. After decades of searching for alien contact, the evidence suggested that contact had already been initiated from the other direction. If these are observation posts, whoever is operating them has technology far beyond our capabilities. But why observe us secretly instead of making direct contact? Rodriguez had been asking herself the same question. The signals suggested that humanity was being studied by multiple groups using different methods, as if they were the subjects of competing research projects. What puzzled her most was the duration of the observations. The anomalous signals had been present for months, suggesting long-term surveillance rather than casual investigation. Meanwhile, aboard the Wanderer, Commander Lars noticed changes in his crew that went far beyond their mission parameters. Vera had begun creating individual art pieces that conflicted with her species' collective aesthetic. Tobias was writing poetry that incorporated emotional concepts foreign to Nexari culture, and Dr. Ocean had started questioning social structures that her people had accepted without challenge for millennia. "What's happening to us?" Kira asked during one of their regular crew meetings. "The psychological changes we're experiencing go beyond simple cultural influence. It's as if observing humans is awakening parts of our consciousness that we didn't know existed." Lars had been wondering the same thing. Each crew member was becoming more creative, more emotionally expressive, more willing to challenge authority, traits that human observation had somehow activated in their alien psychology. They were becoming more like humans without losing their essential nature, as if humanity represented a template for consciousness that their own species had never fully developed. "Perhaps," suggested Zen thoughtfully, "we are witnessing the next stage of galactic evolution. Human consciousness may represent capabilities that all species possess, but most have suppressed in favor of social stability. Contact with humans doesn't corrupt our minds, it completes them." The implications were staggering. If Zen's theory was correct, the Council's prohibition wasn't protecting galactic civilization from human influence. It was preventing the natural evolution of consciousness across dozens of species. Humanity might hold the key to unlocking potential that every intelligent species possessed, but had forgotten how to access. Dr. Rodriguez finally succeeded in triangulating the source of the mysterious signals, confirming that at least one observation post was operating from the asteroid belt. Her attempts to establish communication had failed, but the very presence of hidden observers suggested that humanity's isolation was far from complete. Someone out there was risking everything to study her species, and she was determined to find out why. The Wanderer crew made a unanimous decision to extend their mission despite dwindling supplies and increasing risk of detection. The changes they were experiencing felt too important to abandon, and the data they were collecting about human society might hold answers to questions their species had been asking for millennia. They were no longer just observers. They had become participants in a transformation they didn't fully understand but couldn't resist. As Earth continued its ancient rotation below them, the secret expedition realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity wasn't just another intelligent species. They were the key to unlocking capabilities that evolution had hidden in every conscious mind. The Council had tried to quarantine humanity to protect their static civilizations, but they had only succeeded in creating the galaxy's most precious resource, a living example of what consciousness could become. The Prohibition had made Earth forbidden, but prohibition, as the crew of the Wanderer was discovering, only made the forbidden more irresistible. They had come to observe humans, but in the process they were becoming something new themselves. Beings who combined the best of their original nature with the transformative power of human consciousness. And that transformation, they realized, was exactly what the galaxy needed to break free from the limitations that had held it back for countless generations. Former Council Security Chief Nara had spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing the classified files before making her decision to defect. The weight of the documents in her secure transport case felt heavier than their physical mass. They contained evidence that would shatter the foundation of galactic civilization as every species understood it. Her meeting with Captain David Roth had been arranged through intermediaries who risked execution just for facilitating the contact. The abandoned mining station where they met orbited a dead star system, far from any patrol routes or surveillance networks. Roth arrived in his modified transport, immediately recognizing the significance of a high-ranking council official willing to meet secretly with Earth's most wanted exile. Nara's species, the Alterans, were incapable of deception due to biological, neural structures that made lying physically painful. Her presence alone validated the importance of whatever information she carried. Captain Roth, Nara began without preamble, her translated voice carrying undertones of distress that universal. Translators could barely convey. Everything your species has been told about the Prohibition is false. The Council did not ban contact with Earth because humans are dangerous to galactic peace. They banned it because humans represent an evolutionary path that makes our current civilizations obsolete. Roth studied the Alteran official with growing intensity. He had suspected political motivations behind the Prohibition, but Nara's words suggested something far more profound. What do you mean by evolutionary path? Humans aren't more advanced than Council species. We don't even have faster than light travel yet. Nara activated a holographic display showing comparative brain scans from dozens of species. Technological advancement was never the issue. The problem is consciousness itself. Human neural patterns contain structures that enable paradoxical thinking. Your species can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and synthesize them into innovative solutions. This cognitive flexibility is completely foreign to Council species. The display showed human brain activity during creative problem-solving, revealing neural pathways that activated in patterns no alien species had ever developed. Most galactic civilizations achieved intelligence by suppressing emotional responses, eliminating individual variation, and optimizing for logical consistency. Humans developed intelligence while retaining emotional depth, creative unpredictability, and individual autonomy, traits we considered evolutionary dead ends. Roth absorbed the implications with growing amazement. So the Prohibition isn't about protecting the galaxy from us. It's about protecting established power structures from change. Exactly, Nara confirmed, displaying classified research reports. We conducted secret experiments exposing volunteers, from various species to human cultural materials. Within weeks, subjects began questioning authority structures that had remained stable for millennia. They developed individual goals that conflicted with species objectives, expressed creative desires that served no practical purpose, and worst of all, they started demanding personal freedom. The experimental data was staggering. Altaran subjects, exposed to human music, began composing original pieces that their culture couldn't classify. Nexari volunteers who listened to human poetry developed emotional responses that interfered with pure logical reasoning. Even collective consciousness species like the crystallines started exhibiting individual thought patterns that disrupted their shared mental networks. The Council's leadership realized that prolonged exposure to human consciousness could trigger social revolutions across the galaxy. Nara continued. Species that had achieved perfect order through the suppression of individual desires suddenly found their populations questioning why order was more important than personal fulfillment. The stable societies we had built over millennia began showing cracks within months of human cultural exposure. Roth reviewed case studies that documented the transformation of entire populations. On worlds where human artifacts had been distributed before the Prohibition, governments reported increasing rates of civil disobedience, artistic expression, and individual achievement that conflicted with collective goals. Citizens began making decisions based on personal values rather than social expectations, creating chaos in societies designed around predictable behavioral patterns. The most disturbing discovery, Nara revealed, was that these changes appeared to be irreversible. Beings who had been exposed to human consciousness couldn't return to their previous state of satisfied compliance. They had awakened capabilities that their own evolution had never developed, and they refused to surrender them even when threatened with exile or death. Dr. Vera Chen arrived at the meeting site, just as Nara was explaining the biological mechanisms behind human consciousness. Chen had been tracking signals from the rendezvous location, hoping to make contact with other members of the underground network. Finding Captain Roth in conversation with a council official was either the best or worst possible outcome, Dr. Chen, Roth called out, recognizing her from intelligence reports. You need to hear this. Nara has evidence that explains everything we've been experiencing with the artifact trade and secret expeditions. Chen joined the conversation as Nara displayed neural comparison data that showed fundamental differences between human and alien brain structure. Your species developed what we call integrated consciousness. You maintained emotional, creative, and logical capabilities simultaneously instead of optimizing one at the expense of others. This makes you a natural catalyst for psychological evolution in other species. The revelation struck Chen like a physical blow. Her entire life had been shaped by the belief that humans were somehow deficient compared to other galactic species, lacking the unity and efficiency that marked advanced civilizations. Instead, she was learning that humanity represented a more complete form of consciousness that other species had never achieved. This explains the addiction-like symptoms we've documented in artifact users, Chen realized. They're not being corrupted by human culture. They're being awakened to capabilities they never knew they possessed. Human consciousness serves as a template for what their own minds could become. Nara nodded gravely. The council leadership understands this perfectly. They classified human influence as a cognitive virus, not because it damages alien minds, but because it transforms them in ways that make current power structures unsustainable. A galaxy full of beings who think like humans would be impossible to control through traditional authority mechanisms. The political implications were staggering. The Prohibition hadn't been designed to protect galactic civilization from human chaos. It was designed to protect galactic governments from their own populations, discovering what freedom of thought actually meant. The Council had built their authority on the assumption that intelligent species naturally evolve toward collective conformity. Humans proved that assumption wrong. There's more, Nara continued, activating displays that showed classified military reports. The Prohibition has failed completely. Underground networks are distributing human artifacts to dozens of worlds. Secret expeditions are observing Earth directly, and entire populations are beginning to exhibit human-like psychological traits. The changes we feared are happening anyway, but now they're happening in secret, making them impossible to control or manage. Roth studied intelligence reports that documented growing unrest across Council space. Species that had shown no interest in individual achievement for millennia were suddenly producing artists, inventors, and philosophers whose work challenged fundamental assumptions about their societies. The Council's own military forces were experiencing discipline problems as soldiers began questioning orders that conflicted with personal ethical beliefs. The leadership is terrified, Nara admitted. They're facing the collapse of social order across dozens of worlds, and they have no solution except increased enforcement. But you can't arrest entire populations for thinking differently, and you can't suppress psychological evolution once it begins. The galaxy is changing whether we want it to or not. Chen realized that her research had been documenting a galactic transformation that went far beyond simple cultural exchange. We're witnessing the next stage of consciousness evolution, and humanity is the catalyst. Every species that makes contact with human culture begins developing capabilities they never knew they possessed. It's not corruption, it's completion. The meeting continued for hours as Nara shared classified documents that revealed the full scope of the Council's deception. The prohibition was maintained through propaganda campaigns that portrayed humans as dangerous primitives, while the real threat, humanity's potential to inspire psychological evolution, remained secret. But secrecy was becoming impossible. As more beings experienced human consciousness and refused to give up the transformation it provided. What happens next? Roth asked as the meeting concluded. The Council can't maintain the prohibition if entire populations are demanding contact with Earth. But they also can't admit that they've been lying about the reasons for the ban without triggering revolution across Council space. Nara's expression showed the complex emotions that human exposure had awakened in her own psychology. That depends on beings like us. We can continue operating in secret, helping individuals access human culture, while the Council maintains its failing prohibition. Or we can take the risk of open advocacy, demanding that our populations be allowed to experience the consciousness evolution they deserve. As the three separated to return to their respective missions, each carried the weight of knowledge that could reshape galactic civilization. The prohibition had been built on lies designed to preserve power structures that were already crumbling. Humanity remained isolated on Earth, unaware that their greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology or their resources, but their example of what conscious beings could become when freedom and creativity were allowed to flourish. The revolution had already begun in the minds of individuals across dozens of worlds. Soon it would spread to populations, then to entire species, then to civilization itself. The Council had tried to quarantine humanity to prevent change, but change, as they were about to discover, was as unstoppable as evolution itself. And evolution, guided by the human example, was about to transform the galaxy in ways that would make the current order of things seem like ancient history. The underground communication network that connected dozens of worlds crackled with encrypted transmissions as news of Nara's revelation spread through channels that the Council couldn't monitor. Within days, beings across the galaxy who had been experiencing human-induced psychological changes realized they weren't alone in their transformation. What had begun as isolated incidents of curiosity about forbidden human culture suddenly coalesced into a coordinated movement, demanding truth about the prohibition. On the agricultural world of Kepler Prime, Administrator Yuki Chen discovered that nearly 30% of her population had somehow obtained human artifacts through black market channels. The changes in their behavior were impossible to ignore. Citizens who had followed agricultural quotas without question for generations were now proposing innovative farming techniques, creating artistic installations in their fields, and most troubling for traditional authority, forming voluntary cooperatives that operated outside government oversight. The transformation is accelerating, Yuki reported to her council during an emergency session. Our people are developing capabilities we've never seen before. Individual initiative, creative problem-solving, emotional expression that serves no practical purpose. By all traditional measures, we should consider this social degradation. But our agricultural output has increased by 40%, and citizen satisfaction is at historic highs. Similar reports were coming from worlds throughout the Meridian. Collective. a loose confederation of progressive planets that had always questioned the Council's more restrictive policies. The collective's leadership found themselves in the unprecedented position of governing populations that were rapidly evolving beyond traditional social structures. Citizens were demanding explanations for the prohibition that no official channels were willing to provide. Dr. Maya Rodriguez had been monitoring deep space communications for months, gradually building a profile of the hidden observers studying Earth. Her breakthrough came when she detected a pattern in the transmission sequences that suggested sophisticated attempt at establishing contact. Someone out there was trying to communicate with humanity using mathematical progressions that any advanced civilization would recognize. James, look at this, she called to her colleague Dr. Park, displaying the latest signal analysis. This isn't random observation anymore. They're sending us prime number sequences, mathematical constants, even what appears to be artistic patterns. Someone is trying to tell us they're intelligent and peaceful. Park studied the data with growing excitement. The signals showed increasing complexity over time, as if the senders were learning how to communicate more effectively with each transmission. Most remarkably, the mathematical concepts being transmitted were accompanied by what could only be described as emotional content, variations in signal strength and frequency that seemed to express feelings rather than pure information. They're not just trying to communicate, Park realized. They're trying to share experiences with us. Look at how the signal patterns change when they transmit artistic sequences. It's like they're trying to convey what human art makes them feel. Rodriguez felt her pulse quicken as she understood the implications. Whoever was observing Earth wasn't just studying human technology or social structures. They were trying to understand human consciousness itself. The emotional content in their transmissions suggested that human culture was affecting them in ways they were desperate to share. Captain David Roth had been using his network of contacts to spread Nara's revelations across the galaxy, and the response exceeded his most optimistic expectations. Beings who had risked everything to obtain human artifacts were now organizing into open advocacy groups, demanding that their governments explain the real reasons for the prohibition. The secret was becoming impossible to maintain. Commander Lars received an encrypted message from his homeworld that changed everything. The Wanderer crew had been declared heroes by the Meridian collective leadership, who offered them official protection and full political support for their mission. Their months of secret observation had been vindicated by Nara's revelations, and they were no longer operating as criminals, but as pioneers of galactic consciousness evolution. The collective is prepared to formally challenge the Council's authority, Lars announced to his crew during their daily briefing. They're demanding open contact with Earth and full disclosure of the psychological research that led to the prohibition. We're no longer alone out here. We have the backing of 12 planetary governments. Dr. Kira Oshan felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to the announcement. Her species had eliminated crying as an inefficient emotional response centuries ago, but exposure to human culture had reawakened the capacity for expressing overwhelming feelings through physical responses. The knowledge that their mission had helped trigger a galactic movement for consciousness freedom filled her with emotions she didn't have words to describe. The crew of the Wanderer had documented changes in their own psychology that went far beyond anything the classified research had predicted. Months of observing human society had fundamentally altered their approach to problem-solving, relationship formation, and creative expression. They were becoming something new. Beings who combined the best qualities of their original species with the transformative power of human consciousness. We need to establish direct contact, Dr. Chen announced during a secure communication with the Wanderer crew. Rodriguez has confirmed that she can detect your observation posts and she's actively trying to communicate. If we can create a direct channel between Earth and the galaxy, we can bypass the Council entirely. The technical challenges were enormous. Any communication attempt risked detection by Council patrols, and humanity had no idea that their planet was under observation by friendly forces. But the potential rewards, the first official diplomatic contact between humans and aliens, made the risks acceptable to beings who had already risked everything for the chance to understand human consciousness. Rodriguez worked tirelessly to decode the increasingly complex signals from the mysterious observers. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the mathematical sequences were being combined with artistic patterns that referenced human cultural works. The observers were using human art as a communication medium, proving they had extensive knowledge of human culture and were trying to establish common ground. "They know us," she reported to her research team. "Whoever is out there has been studying our art, our music, our literature. They're using references to human creativity as a way to prove their peaceful intentions. This isn't first contact with aliens who know nothing about us. This is contact with beings who understand human culture better than most humans do." The political situation in Council space deteriorated rapidly as more worlds demanded explanations for the prohibition. The Alteran Federation faced internal pressure from citizens who had been exposed to human artifacts and refused to return to their previous state of emotional suppression. The Nexari Collective experienced unprecedented rates of individual achievement that disrupted their logical social planning. Even the machine-based intelligences reported developing what they could only describe as digital emotions after processing human artistic works. Council security forces found themselves unable to enforce the prohibition as underground networks operated with increasing boldness. Ships carrying human artifacts moved freely between worlds whose governments officially supported the ban, but whose populations openly demanded access to human culture. The enforcement apparatus designed to maintain galactic order was breaking down, as the beings responsible for enforcement began questioning the orders they were given. "The revolution is happening whether we acknowledge it or not," Nara reported to a secret gathering of progressive council members. "Populations across the galaxy are experiencing consciousness evolution that makes our current authority structures obsolete. We can either lead this transformation or be swept away by it, but we cannot stop it." The Meridian Collective made their formal announcement on a day that would become known as Liberation Day across the galaxy. They declared their intention to establish direct diplomatic contact with Earth and invited any species that supported consciousness freedom to join them. Within hours, 23 worlds had announced their support. And by the end of the week, nearly half the galaxy's intelligent species were demanding an end to the prohibition. Dr. Rodriguez received the clearest signal yet from the hidden observers. A transmission that included mathematical proofs, artistic references, and what appeared to be an invitation for direct communication. She realized that someone out there was ready to risk everything for the chance to make official contact with humanity. The only question was whether Earth was ready to learn that they were not alone in the universe. The growing movement had reached a tipping point. Secret networks were becoming open advocacy groups. Hidden expeditions were revealing themselves as diplomatic missions, and the prohibition that was supposed to protect galactic civilization was becoming the catalyst for its transformation. Humanity remained isolated on Earth, unaware that their greatest contribution to the galaxy was inspiring other species to become more than they had ever thought possible. The Council faced a choice that would determine the future of galactic civilization: adapt to the reality of consciousness evolution or face revolution across dozens of worlds. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. The human example had shown other species what they could become, and no force in the universe could make them forget that knowledge. The age of enforced conformity was ending, and the age of conscious freedom was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened under circumstances that no member had ever imagined possible. Half the galaxy's intelligent species were in open rebellion against the prohibition. Underground networks had become public advocacy movements, and secret expeditions to Earth were revealing themselves as official diplomatic missions. Ambassador Korean faced a chamber filled with representatives demanding answers about the real reasons behind humanity's quarantine. Administrator Yuki Chen stood before the assembly as the first official representative to formally challenge the Council's authority. Her world of Kepler Prime had voted unanimously to invite human ambassadors for cultural exchange, setting a precedent that dozens of other worlds were prepared to follow. "We demand an end to the deception that has kept our populations from experiencing the consciousness evolution they deserve," she declared, her voice carrying the confidence of a leader who no longer feared Council retaliation. The cascade effect was unstoppable. Within hours of Kepler Prime's announcement, the agricultural worlds of the Meridian Collective declared their intention to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. By the end of the day, mining colonies, research stations, and even some military outposts had joined the movement. The prohibition that had once commanded absolute obedience was crumbling under the weight of galactic demand for truth. Captain David Roth received the message he had been hoping for his entire exile: official invitation to return to Earth as humanity's first extraterrestrial ambassador. The irony wasn't lost on him that he would be introducing his own species to the galaxy they had been forbidden to contact. His modified transport, once a symbol of exile and isolation, was now equipped with diplomatic credentials from 27 worlds eager to establish contact with humanity. Dr. Maya Rodriguez finally succeeded in establishing two-way communication with the mysterious observers when Commander Lars responded to her. Mathematical sequences with artistic patterns that could only have come from beings who understood human culture intimately. The first message was simple but profound. We are friends who have been watching and learning. We wish to meet. This is Dr. Rodriguez of the Earth Deep Space Communications Project, she transmitted back, knowing that her words were making history. We welcome contact with peaceful beings. We have much to learn from each other. The response came within minutes: coordinates for a meeting location in the outer solar system, and an invitation for humanity's first diplomatic mission to the stars. The technical challenges of arranging humanity's first alien contact were staggering. Earth's governments had no protocols for extraterrestrial diplomacy, no understanding of galactic politics, and no idea that their planet had been under observation for months. Rodriguez found herself serving as both translator and cultural guide, explaining human society to aliens while preparing humanity for the shock of galactic contact. Dr. Vera Chen arrived at Earth aboard the Wanderer, becoming the first human-born, exiled to return home in over a year. Her role as liaison between the expedition crew and Earth's scientific community proved invaluable as both sides struggled to understand the implications of direct contact. The psychological changes she had experienced during her time in galactic society provided a preview of what humanity might become through expanded contact with alien consciousness. The beings observing us aren't trying to conquer or control Earth, Chen explained to the hastily assembled diplomatic team. They're seeking something we possess that their own species never developed: the ability to think creatively, feel deeply, and act individually while maintaining social cooperation. We're not primitive beings in need of guidance. We're teachers who don't realize what we have to offer. The crew of the Wanderer prepared for their historic role as facilitators of first contact. Months of observing human society had transformed them into beings who could serve as bridges between worlds, understanding both human unpredictability and alien logic. Commander Lars realized that his crew had become something unprecedented in galactic history. Aliens who thought like humans while retaining their essential nature. Earth's first contact with galactic civilization took place not through invasion or dramatic arrival, but through a quiet meeting between Dr. Rodriguez and Commander Lars in a small research facility outside Denver. The Wanderer crew materialized through advanced transportation technology that seemed like magic to human observers. But their message was remarkably simple. We come seeking friendship and mutual understanding. The initial cultural exchange revealed the extent to which human consciousness had already influenced galactic civilization. Species across the galaxy had been studying human art, literature, and social structures for months, developing psychological capabilities they never knew they possessed. The prohibition hadn't prevented human influence. It had made that influence more powerful by transforming it into forbidden knowledge. Your species represents something we thought was impossible, Dr. Kira Ocean explained to the assembled human diplomats. You achieved intelligence without sacrificing creativity, developed technology without eliminating emotion, and built societies without suppressing individual achievement. You are living proof that consciousness can evolve beyond the limitations we accepted as inevitable. The formal announcement of alien contact triggered profound changes across Earth's political and social structures. Governments that had spent decades preparing for potential alien invasion found themselves hosting diplomatic delegations from species eager to learn about human consciousness. The greatest challenge wasn't defending Earth from alien conquest, but managing the sudden influx of beings desperate to experience human culture firsthand. Captain Roth established the Independent Contact Initiative as Earth's official diplomatic body for galactic relations. The organization operated on principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit, reflecting human values while accommodating the diverse needs of dozens of alien species. For the first time in galactic history, an interspecies organization was built around individual choice rather than collective obligation. The Council's authority collapsed within weeks of open contact between Earth and the rebel worlds. Populations across the galaxy refused to return to their previous state of psychological limitation, and governments that tried to enforce the old restrictions faced revolution. The age of enforced conformity was ending, replaced by an era of conscious evolution guided by human example. Dr. Chen and Dr. Rodriguez worked together to establish protocols for safe cultural exchange that protected both human independence and alien psychological stability. The research revealed that exposure to human consciousness triggered dormant capabilities in every intelligent species they studied. Aliens weren't being corrupted by human influence. They were remembering aspects of consciousness their own. Evolution had forgotten. The transformation of galactic civilization accelerated as more species made contact with Earth. Art galleries displayed works that combined human creativity with alien perspective. Research stations studied problems using methods that integrated logical analysis with intuitive insight. Even military organizations began operating on principles of individual initiative rather than rigid command structures. We're witnessing the birth of a new form of galactic civilization, Chen observed, as she watched human and alien children playing together in the first integrated educational facility. These young beings are growing up with capabilities that neither species possessed alone. Human creativity enhanced by alien logic, alien efficiency enhanced by human emotion. They represent the future of consciousness in the galaxy. The former. Prohibition became a symbol of the old order's fear of change, while humanity's integration into galactic society marked the beginning of unprecedented cooperation and creativity across the stars. Earth was no longer isolated behind barriers of law and enforcement, but connected to a network of worlds eager to share in the consciousness evolution that human contact provided. Commander Lars retired from space exploration to become Earth's first alien citizen, choosing to spend his remaining years studying the human society that had transformed his understanding of what life could be. His crew scattered across the galaxy as teachers and ambassadors, spreading the principles of consciousness freedom to species still struggling with the limitations of their traditional social structures. The galaxy that had once banned contact, with Earth now celebrated humanity as the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. Species that had stagnated for millennia were discovering new capabilities, creating unprecedented art, and solving problems that had seemed impossible under their old ways of thinking. The human gift to the galaxy wasn't technology or resources, but the simple demonstration that consciousness could be free. Dr. Rodriguez looked up at the stars from her new observatory, knowing that hundreds of worlds were looking back at Earth with gratitude rather than fear. The prohibition had been designed to isolate humanity from galactic civilization, but instead it had created the conditions for humanity's greatest contribution, showing other species that there was no limit to what conscious beings could become. When freedom and creativity were allowed to flourish, the age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic consciousness had begun, and at the center of it all was a small blue planet whose greatest export was not goods or services, but the simple idea that every thinking being deserved the right to become everything they were capable of being. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed to become truly alive.